All right, everyone. I am here with Master Sergeant Jamie Zimmer. You are the Command Chief, Executive Assistant for Chief Master Sergeant Trickey, the Command Chief for the 53rd Wing at Eglin Air Force Base. Could you first tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. As you said, I'm Master Sergeant Jamie Zimmer. I am currently sitting as Command Chief Exec, but I have had a vast and diverse career, and I'm very, very fortunate for that. So, been in for about 12 years. I like to say I'm still on the baby side of enlistment. Came in 2011, came in as a 1-0, which at the time was an operational intelligence analyst. Spent about 4 or 5 years doing that, worked with the A-10 community, absolutely the best job. I loved it. It was amazing. Got to deploy with them, go on several TDYs, do lots of operational exercises. It was fantastic. Then I went over to the rescue group and learned all about the rescue mission, got to work with PJs, got to do C-130 stuff, did a couple joint operations. It was really awesome, great experience. And in true Air Force fashion, anytime you're doing really well at something, the Air Force is like, let's change it up on you.
Right.
And I got vectored for DSD. I had the opportunity to teach at the Jason D. Cunningham Schoolhouse at Moody Air Force Base for 4 years. And that was the most eye-opening experience of my life. Outside of the Air Force, nothing humbles you like a room full of senior airmen with, all of their eyes on you, watching every little move you make. So I had the opportunity to do that for 4 years, met probably over 1,000 students. We push students every single year, met some of my best friends in the Air Force doing that. But it is a controlled tour, so after 4 years, they make you leave. So I had the opportunity to then PCS for the very first time for my first duty station. And I went from Moody Air Force Base and landed at Eglin Air Force Base. Was at Eglin for about 6 to 9 months and had returned back to the career field of intel, was working a completely different mission set. I was in electronic warfare, totally outside of my comfort zone. I was working with 1 and 2s, which are very different than the 1-0 career field. Even though they have that one end, they're just vastly different. Completely different training, so very much outside of my element in that. But the position came down for the Command Chief Exec. I had previously applied at Moody Air Force Base, and I said, I really tried for it. Maybe I'll just get one more shot. At the time, I was a brand new mom. My daughter was less than 6 months old, so I kind of felt like I was going out and taking a huge risk because as a new mom taking on a very demanding position, I kind of started second guessing myself, is this the job that I actually want? Well, that decision was made literally 48 hours later when the chief that hired me, Chief Martin, who's now at Holloman, came down, handed me the exec patch and was like, you're hired. So it was an awesome experience to kind of have that decision solidified for me, because it's terrifying when you're a new mom and you're trying to navigate new base, new parent, just different dynamic. It was very challenging, but I've been sitting in the exec position now for just about a year, and as soon as I was hired, I got picked up for NCOA. So it was very interesting navigating those first couple months as an exec, but I wouldn't change for the world. It's such a great job. I'm so fortunate that I've got to do so many different things in my career. I've gotten to be operational, but I've also gotten the opportunity to serve airmen how they need to be served, and all the way from senior airman tier all the way up to now, a chief. So it's been really, really rewarding for me.
Right, that's awesome. And you said you had a daughter, so you're married, and you mentioned your husband's in the military, and that mill-to-mill lifestyle, I totally get it. I'm rough. There with you. It is rough. We've been doing it for about 10 years. How do you guys handle your everyday mill-to-mill struggles?
So yesterday was actually our 9-year anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary.
And thank you. And we were apart, and I felt so bad. But, I count my blessings because probably the last 3 or 4 anniversaries we've actually been together, and which has been so fantastic, because I know how many birthdays have you missed, how many anniversaries, all of those things. As military members, we kind of put them to the side, and we're like, oh, well, it's just another day. We can kind of do it whenever, right? Even holidays, we get to that point. No, but my husband and I have, so we were tech school. We met in tech school. We always get a lot of crap for that one. But we met in tech school. We did not get married in tech school, though. So I feel like that's important to caveat. We did not get married in tech school. We did about 18 months apart when we first met. So 18 months apart. He got to Korea. I went to Moody. He was coming home like probably a month or two. Like before he came home, I found out I was deploying and had to go. So we got to see each other for like a mid-tour for like 2 weeks. Yeah. And my like only stipulation was like, please don't ask me to marry you on a 2-week leave. We haven't seen each other. So he did, and he waited until we were stationed together. We were your typical A1C senior airman trying to navigate like new life, moving in together. Like people don't talk about that when you're in the military. It's like we kind of had to move in together really quick because you want to make sure that you get stationed together. So it's a very accelerated timeline. Thankfully for us, it's worked out and it's made us stronger, right? That's not to say like we haven't been without struggles. Like it is, you have to wake up every single day and choose to understand that you've chosen the Air Force and you've chosen marriage and you've chosen family, and sometimes balancing that can be very challenging. And you always have to prioritize one. It's this constant, and there's a constant switch of, okay, what's going to be today's priority? And we'd love to always wake up with the game plan being like, okay, today it's going to be family. But, the more rank you have, the more responsibility you have, sometimes you have to prioritize, job first. So we've been doing that, and he's also in a very, very demanding career field that requires him to go TDY, work long hours. So, but we've been very, very fortunate. Like I cannot say enough how fortunate him and I have been as far as like TDY's deployments. Like we've been able to support our family, support our daughter, and have had really great assignments.
Well, that's awesome. So don't feel bad about being a tech school romance. I met my husband in a designated smoking area in the dorm. So,
exactly.
You meet people and it's a life experience being in the military. There's so many different places you can meet people and, so I heard a story yesterday from one of our folks. She teaches ALS at Travis where we're at. She met her husband in basic training. He was in her brother flight. And they were apart for so long, never held hands, never kissed, never did anything. And then they just got married. So it's really interesting how people get together in the military. But I mean, it is awesome too at the same time because you have a mutual understanding. I talked about this with Josh White the night before last when we did a podcast together. I was talking to him about, I love that if I can't find my name tag, I can just be like, excuse me, Michael, can you hook me up over here? So that's really cool about it. But yes, it's definitely a struggle, and the communication and stuff with the kids. Hey, Maggie, my oldest daughter's 8 and my youngest is 4. And so, Maggie's got a doctor's appointment. Are you going to take her? Am I going to take her? Or, hey, she's sick. You going to take her? Or I'm going to take her. I got her this time. You got her next time. So, I don't know, does your child go to the CDC?
Oh, yeah.
So you know how it is with oh my gosh, a petri dish of germs. I mean, you want to talk about, oh my gosh, germs, yes. So even when they get the smallest fever, they're like, see you later. And then, you go take them to the doctor and then they're like, the fever's not high enough. So you're like, I don't know what to do with my kid.
So our child adventure was a little bit more complicated because we ended up getting pregnant the second week of COVID.
Oh.
So everyone's like, oh, like that house arrest. But like I've been doing some like fertility stuff and everything like that. And they looked at me and they were like, this is like, you gotta do this now because we don't know like the next time we're going to get you in to even see a doctor. So we were like, what? Right. And then lo and behold, second week of COVID, I ended up getting pregnant. So we navigated all of that like through COVID as well.
Wow.
But it's not really talked about that when we were going back to the CDC, like you said, like anytime there was any inkling of like any fever, anything. But then it was 10 days. Like they were so it was so hard as mil-to-mil members because he works classified. At the time I was working classified, you can't telework with that. So like literally, thankfully our leadership at the time was flexible and they were like, okay, you know, just alternate every other day. But then like if you were direct exposed, so it was like this super complicated issue to navigate with like childcare. And that's why like my heart goes out to people all the time, because it's like, we didn't know how to navigate that. And our leaders didn't know how to navigate that because it was all this unknown. And as like a married couple, it did put a lot of stress on us because it was like, we had to prioritize like, okay, like who's going to tap out this one, like you said. So
right.
yeah, it's the mill to mill dynamic is challenging, but it's also rewarding because a lot of days we sit back, like at the end of the day when you're exhausted and you've like gotten through it. And you just lay there and you like look at each other and like we'll just like give each other a high five and be like,
you know what I also noticed as far as COVID, and my youngest daughter was about almost a year old when actually about a year. She turned 1 in April of 2020, and we took her out of the CDC for forever because I could telework, so it was fine. But then when I had to put her back into the CDC, she was sick all the time.
Yep.
So she didn't get the, build up her immune system like my oldest did. So it was definitely a challenge. So the mill-to-mill life can be a struggle, and I definitely empathize with you on that one. For sure. But yeah, it's nice to always have someone that understands
that gets
too.
it.
Yeah, they get it. So tell me why you wanted to be an exec.
So when I was at Moody, I was a brand new staff sergeant, and I was very, very close to the chief that was the command chief at the time. It was Chief Master Sergeant Sebastian. And he was the best, like legitimately the best. Like he was amazing. He would just engage with airmen on base just at a very relatable, and if you knew him, he called everybody kiddo. Like everyone was his kiddo. And I'd had the opportunity to actually shadow him a couple of times and got an opportunity to go TDY with him, kind of similar to this, like to a convention. And his exec was actually leaving, and I asked him, I said, can I put in? And he's like, yep, you meet the criteria, you can put in. And at the time, I was traveling, and he interviewed me, he asked me lots of questions, and he said, hey, because of what you're going through right now and why you're traveling so much, he's like, I don't know if this is the best opportunity for you right now. He's like, that's not a no, it's just a right now issue. So at the time, I was putting in for some intel specific opportunities like Green Door stuff. I was putting in for the command chief exec position, and then I found out I was being put in for DSD, so I had all these like plates kind of spinning, but ultimately I wanted to be the command chief exec just because I had such a high admiration for who Chief Seabass was, and I have the highest admiration for him because he came in person, came over to me, which was misleading because I was like, I got it, right? And he came over and he said, hey kiddo, and like as soon as he said that, I was like, oh, and he goes, I just wanted to tell you in person, we didn't pick you up for it. So I was like, okay, I appreciate that. And he sat down with me for probably an hour and just gave me feedback, things I could do better, how I can grow. He's like, you're a baby staff sergeant. And he's like, that's not the driving factor of why I didn't pick you. He's like, your TD, why ops tempo is right now. But he provided me very deliberate feedback on how to become better, faster, stronger. And he said, someday you will be an exec. So when this position did come up, Chief was actually battling cancer at the time, Chief Seabass. Unfortunately, we did lose him last year, and he was the best chief ever. But I'll never forget, I messaged him, I texted him, and I said, hey, I'm going for it. And he goes, you're not going for it, kiddo, you got it. Aww. And I was like, he was just a phenomenal leader. But the reason for me deciding to be an exec was because of him. And he'd always call me his exec 2.0, because it was he would come over to the schoolhouse after I got hired as ALS instructors, and he would bring us pizza and stuff, and he always would. We had such a great relationship with us, as the cadre, and he would bring us pizza, and we'd sit down, and he would be like, hey, did you check my calendar? I didn't have access to anything, and I'd be like, oh, I'll call, and he's like, no, you don't have to actually call. But that was my first glimpse, and I loved seeing the relationship that the exec had with the chief and how foundational an exec actually was, like making sure that they are the best for their airmen and like kind of taking as much as they can off their plate. So when this one came around, like I said, like I was a new mom. I was like, am I making the silliest mistake right now? Because if you're familiar with are you familiar with Eglin?
No.
Okay, so we live in Crestview, for everyone who understands that. It's such a long drive. It's like an hour of traffic every single day. So I'm like, now I'm working longer hours. I'm driving an hour every single day. I'm like never going to see my kid. But when I tell you the job satisfaction far outweighed any of the logistical barriers I had, it was like game changer. Because every day I go into work, and it's not only like the camaraderie and just the dynamic that Chief and I have, and with both the chiefs I had this, it's just the overall dynamic of like the work environment and knowing that what you're doing, even though everyone's like, oh, it's paper pushing, it's like it has a direct impact on so many touch points. Like we are the conduit of information up to the commander, up to the command chief. We're also the protectors of information and like their time and keeping them. Like my job isn't an administrative or an executive assistant. Like my job is to be the best supportive wingman I can be to chief. Sometimes that's protecting him, sometimes in like his time, his value, and then sometimes it's being like, you're going too fast, right? We need to slow down, like let's take a break, let's reconvene, and protecting like his time with his family and that kind of stuff. So being a command chief exec is demanding, but like the reward is awesome, because man, when an airman or a staff sergeant gets picked up for step, like they probably don't even know how much work we put into their package and like how we rack and stacked and we looked at it and we did this, right? And I'm up at the wing and I have all these touch points and I'm editing all this stuff, and like, and it's, sometimes people are like, it's such a thankless job, and it's really not, because the thank you is when I get to call, when Chief and I get to call that group SDL and we're like, they got it. Like they got it. That is the biggest reward. And it like, when those things happen, like knowing that I'm a trusted agent and I get to pull the staff sergeant, like yesterday was awesome because I laughed because like the whole hotel reception area was all these execs and we're all like pulling lists and stuff like that, because we're the ones who get to push that information out to our leaders so they can tell their people. Like when you sit back and you think about that, like it's just such a powerful thing to know, like where I'm behind the curtain, like I'm the wizard behind the curtain that gets like pull these like little strings and be like, and then just watch the show and the production go. Like, we're not the ones out bowing on the stage, we're behind calling the cues. And if you're familiar with theater, like we're the little cue card in the back, like making sure all things go right. But it's so important. It's so important. And it's a grind, but it's literally, it's the most rewarding job, because you get to see at squadron, group, wing level, just success across the board.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And I'm picking up on the passion you have for it right now, and it's super contagious. Yeah. It's great. I talked to Chief Ludd earlier, the new AFPC command chief, and we were talking about how the list when it leaks, and how important those trusted agents are. He specifically foot stomped the fact that we have to make sure that our trusted agents know how important it is to keep close hold to those things, to just make sure to be that trusted agent and what it can do and how it impacts the force. So thank you so much for being that trusted agent, because I've had a lot of conversations about the list lately being leaked. I wrote a blog about it, and I've talked about it on my Facebook page, the Air Force Writing and Self-Improvement page. I've took polls on it just to see what the thoughts of what thoughts people had on it. So.
I was so grateful. So I made it the year that I got leaked on Reddit. I mean, Master of the Year got leaked on Reddit, right? And I knew something was weird, because I don't get push notifications to my phone just because it's like so distracting to me. But like my phone was pinging, and I was like, why is my phone going off so much? And I literally picked it up, and when I did, it was when Chief Martin was the command chief. and it like rings, and I like see his picture, and I'm like, oh no, right? And I like answer the phone call, and so Chief was a prior MTI, so he can like turn that voice on like that, and he kind of was like, why do my group commanders and squadron commanders have the list before I do? And I was like, I didn't even know it was out. So like, I'm literally running around the house, like putting on my boots. I have them on speakerphone. I'm like doing this, and I'm like, you know, I'm running around like crazy. I was like, okay, I can get to base. It's going to take me 25 minutes to get to base. South, no traffic. We're okay. And I'm like, okay, I can do it. And I'm running around. And I'm like, where did it come from? He's like, I guess it was on Reddit. And I was like, okay, all right. I was like, I got it, right? And my husband's sitting there, and he's like looking at me like this. He's like mouthing, like, did you get it? And I'm like, least of my worries right now. I'm a brand new exec. Right. Stuff just hit the fan. I gotta go.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he goes, oh, and I guess I can tell you now, congratulations, Master Sergeant. And I was just like, what? So, but had it been like 2 more minutes, I probably would have found out, because like I literally went to my messenger like 2 seconds later, and I had like 16 people be like, congrats, Master Sergeant. And I don't think people understand, like, I literally waited 11 years to hear someone say you've made Master Sergeant. And like, if I had found out on Facebook Messenger, like I probably would have been devastated. Like I would have been so upset. Like that personal phone call was so special to me, because even though it was chaos and he played a mean prank on me,
it's an amazing story though.
It is. And I was so grateful, and I actually just told him this when I saw him here this weekend. I was like, I'm so grateful that you got to tell me that in person, and that wasn't ruined for me, because so many people had that opportunity taken away from them. Like it wasn't just a person, it was supervisors, it was commanders. They all lost that opportunity after watching people grow, and they never got to say those words. They never got to congratulate people, because everyone knew if you knew, like you can't hide that. Like there's a genuine surprise. So yeah, being that trusted agent, and that goes all the way across, you know, even knowing when people have won awards packages, and the importance of allowing command teams at the group level and the squadron level to notify their people. I love when Chief Tricky says this. He always tells me, like, if commanders have to discipline their people, they should be able to reward their people. And we both like firmly believe in that. And I'm always like, nope, we let the group know, the group can tell them, or that, you know, we give them that opportunity to let their people know that they've also done great things. So yeah, that there's a whole different level of responsibility that comes with being an exec that maybe you aren't adequately prepared for until you're actually in the seat, and you're like, whew, because I mean, you see disciplinary stuff, you see the good, you see the bad, you see everything. And, you know, I kind of treat it like HIPAA, right? Like you can't go around telling people's business. Like you're still going to see them, you're going to interact with them, and like you can't let people know, right? Things are different, and you know, but it's definitely my favorite to tell people good news. Yeah, I like the good news much better.
I can definitely see why, and I definitely see the passion, which is really cool. So I'm guessing, you know, that's one of the unique things about your position, is that you get to, you know, tell the good news. Is there any part of the position that you're like, it's kind of a drag, but you know what, I'll get it on? The good, the bad, and the ugly, you know?
So task management and task prioritization is very challenging in this position, because you deal with the actual task demand, and then you deal with personnel demands, and those don't always align as you'd hope. And discerning between, okay, this is a pretty tangible task that has to be done, but then like we have airmen at X base that, you know, there was just a forest fire and they've lost everything. Like you have to prioritize that. And what's really unique about our wing is we have 16 different locations. So we have 16 GSUs. We're literally across CONUS. Like we got touch points everywhere. So when I say I see Chief maybe 1 week a month, that's not even an exaggeration. Like we've gone 6 weeks at a time without physically seeing each other in person. I mean, we talk on the phone every day, we'll FaceTime, we do all these things. So it's a really unique dynamic that we have to have, but it's also good because that technology really helps shape us. But being able to prioritize is probably one of the most challenging pieces of the job. And also, there's like a customer service aspect that no one really tells you that's there, because people just want to like pop by the wing and say hi, which is really awesome. But like, that's where my job exists. Mm-hmm. So I have to learn how to professionally and tactfully tell somebody to like go away, without it seeming like I'm being like, okay, I have this really important task to do. So learning how to manage people in that aspect and like mend relationships in that way is challenging too, like that people don't tell you about, because like they see it as a break. Like I get to come up here and pop up and say what's up to everybody, and then I'm like, like I got to do my job. And you can get that as support personnel. It's
for sure.
Yeah,
it is definitely
it's a challenge.
Yeah, especially when people like, I think the most challenging part is dealing with cranky people. So, you know, and they just want to vent it all out, and you're just like, okay, I just need to hear this person out, and then hopefully they feel better. But, you know, I do get it. Being tactful is definitely a challenge in and of itself,
right,
when it comes to customer service. And I get it.
and it's hard, and probably another limitation, and this is very specific to our wing, but you know, when Chief Flood was up there and he was talking about AFPC, right? So 16 different locations, we have to operate through 16 different FSSs.
Oh my goodness.
So when you're saying things like, oh, we're going to do the EFDP panel and we're going to pull a MEL, you're like, oh, I can just go FSS. No, that's 16 different locations that like if there's an error on one, we have to, so there's a lot of challenges that present themselves specifically with our wing. And one thing that we are really thriving at right now is we have the first fully approved A staff. So like we have our own A1, which is glorious. It's wonderful, right?
Awesome.
And they work so hard to make sure that things are like running as they should. But again, there's like this logistics barrier that we're like literally separated and across CONUS. So just really that task management is just the primary piece of. You got to find your own, like I always say, like you got to find your own vibe. Like you got to find what works for you. Right. If it's 1,000 sticky notes, have at it. Like whatever it is, like my notebook, I have it over there. It's literally just anything that is short-term memory. I have to write it down because I will not remember it. And everyone's like, you have so much, like you're organized. And I'm like it's just 1,000 bullet points. And I'm like, okay, sure, if we want to call that organized. But yeah, you just have to have your own system when you do it.
For sure. So Chief told me, we had a conversation about you yesterday. He is a great guy. I was super excited to meet him during the AUSA convention. And he said, you know, you may think I'm interesting, but my exec, she is just on top of things. She's amazing. He is a cool guy, and he had nothing but wonderful things to say about you. Can you tell me what your work dynamic is like, and maybe how he inspires you as a person and an airman? Yeah,
I'm really glad that me paying him has worked well for him to sing my praise. No, I'm just kidding. So I got hired by Chief Martin, who was a great chief. Got along really well with him. He was like standards to the T, MTI, just like presents itself through just everything he does. So when I found out we were losing him and we were getting a new chief, I was like, oh, come on, I got to relearn all this stuff, a whole new person, right? And I knew I was going to like Chief Tricky because the first time he called me, he FaceTimed me. And it was like 7 o'clock in the morning, which he was an hour or two behind. And I'm like, first of all, why are you up this early? Second of all, why are you FaceTiming me? Like, it was just so funny. And he's like, what's up, sister? That was the first thing he said to me. He's like, what's up, sister? And literally since that day, he's never, he'll call me Jay every now and then, but like, it's always like, thanks, sister. So he has such a wingman mentality. And that's probably the number one thing that he's taught me is like, we're each other's wingmans first. Like, first and foremost, whether that be with professionalism, whether that be through, personal interactions, like we're wingmen. We watch out for each other all the time. But Chief is so diligent about finding like little pockets of time to like throw, like I always say, like he throws me like a little one-liner of development. And it takes me like 2 or 3 days to kind of stew on it because I'm very stubborn. I'm very, very stubborn. And then I'll come back a couple days later, and like it's wonderful because like we'll have a very in-depth conversation just about like what he's presented to me, or like what that little one nugget of knowledge he threw at me meant, and like how I can use that, because like I said, like he's on the road a lot, so a lot of times we have like a day with each other, like to download information, to work, to brainstorm. And one of the best things that he told me was actually, we're working on my EPB. And, you know, I drafted my EPB. I was like super proud of myself. I was like, I did it, like narrative writing, right? And I sent it to him, and I said, you know, Chuck Spears is necessary, right? This is not a perfect process. Mm-hmm. And he goes, what is it you think you actually do for me? And I'm like, well, I keep your calendar, I do your itineraries, I do your DTS, as much as I hate it, right? And I was giving him just tangibles, right? Of like, do. And he's like, but what do you actually do? I'm like, I don't know, right? And he goes, you're an advisor. And I like laughed. I was like, me, an advisor? And he goes, you're an advisor. He goes, how many times do I ask you to come into my office and ask you a specific question? And I say, what do you think about it? And I kind of paused, because the biggest thing that Chief has taught me is like trust. Trusting not only in another person, but like trust in yourself and trust in your own decision making. And he's very good about giving like, here your left, your right, everything else happens in between, and that's okay. Where I came from, very like everything is black and white, AFI rules, following it to a T, like everything is organized. So it's given me freedom to act in that advising role to him. And I laugh because I'm like, now I call myself his principal advisor. I don't even call myself his exec. And it's because like, and he has a white office or a whiteboard in his office, and like we'll go in there, we'll like brainstorm stuff and we'll talk through stuff. And it really gave me a sense of empowerment, because he holds me in such a high regard that it has drastically built my confidence. But it's also it's reciprocated in a relationship where, you know, every day he's like, I'm still here. I'm like, I'm still here too. Like, when you think about it, you know, as a new command chief, that's going to be intimidating, coming to our wing as well with like 16 different locations. So he's taught me how to have confidence in myself, but he's also grown in kind of pouring into another person. And we actually were at breakfast this morning. We grabbed a coffee and just were talking, and we were talking about just like previous experiences and previous leaders. And I said, I think the hardest part about you moving on to a new wing and me not getting to work with you every day is, I said, this is one of the first times that I've had a leader that I'm forced to grow with, not a leader I'm forced to grow from. Mm-hmm. So when you have those challenging leaders, or those leaders who like maybe you don't work well with, or, you know, it's just a personality clash, you grow from them, right? You almost distance yourself from them, because you're like, whew, I don't want to be like them.
Right.
But when you have a leader that you can grow with, like, that's power. Like, we are constantly challenging each other to be better. He's asking me questions, I'm asking him questions. Like, he asked me like, hey, was I on par of this? Wasn't I? And like, when I provide him feedback, he takes it and he's like, yeah, like, and he does the same to me. So that was kind of like a very unexpected dynamic that I wasn't really prepared for. Like, you know, because you're like, oh, it's just, you know, it's just a chief, but like the mentorship is constant, and really learning to grow with somebody has probably been the best part of the dynamic that Chief and I have. Is like, we're in this together. It's not, you know, I'm not just constantly like feeding information. It goes up, it goes down, like information goes laterally, like we're working together as a team to move everything forward.
Awesome. He sounds like a great guy to work
He's
for.
amazing.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
And you're lucky to have that opportunity, because not everybody can say that they've had leadership like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's far and few between sometimes in the Air Force.
Yeah, and I came from a couple of really hard leaders that it was a grow from situation. Mm-hmm. And that's what today when you're talking, I was like, this is really like the hardest part, is because like when you have somebody who's so good, and then to like kind of have to, like, they got to move on. Like, that's the story of the Air Force. When you're really good, like, you got to move on.
Yeah.
And just knowing that I've had that opportunity to grow with him as opposed to like growing beside him or from him has been really awesome.
That's awesome. So there is something really special about you that Josh and I were talking about last night, and he mentioned that you were one of the 12 outstanding airmen of the year. So I think that's just amazing. And what was your feeling when you found out? Like, what did you think about it? Were you in shock? How'd you find out?
Well, thank you for acknowledging that. I really appreciate that. It is a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so grateful for my time and the opportunity to serve next to we call them 16ers. Chief Mater, if he ever watches this, he's gonna yell at me because I always call us 16ers. But no, like, you get so close to those other 12 people or those other 11 people that like you become family. Like, there's actually another one here right now. Sergeant Curry she's here, and it was funny because we were working out. It was like 4:30 at the gym. I'm like, oh, and she walks in. She's like, Zimmer, and I was like, oh my god, And it's like your family. It's very quick. So I was a senior airman when I was a 12 OAY. And it was a very unexpected, totally wasn't, it was just unexpected. Because you never go into like an annual award being like, oh, I'm going to be a 12 OAY. Because I had been a previous wing winner, sat up there, did the board, and like lost. So I was like, oh, good. I get to go through this all over again, right? So I kind of had like wrote it off. And I remember sitting there and we were looking through my awards package, and some of the information, the first right, like you look at a bullet and you're like, that's not really quite how it happened. And like information originally had kind of been expanded upon a little bit greater than it should have been. And the captain at the time, I sat down and I was like, hey, I love what you're doing and I love that you're putting me in for this, but I don't know if I have the good conscience to put this information in if it's not going to be 100% credible. Like, I kind of fought him tooth and nail, and he was like, all right. He's like, I'm telling you, it's valid information. So we pushed it with taking that out. So like literally I was like, I'm done. Like, this is it. Like, I had a good run, really awesome opportunity, but like, this is it. So then I won at Numbered Air Force. And I was like, well, that's cool, the first time. And then I won ACC. And I was like, okay, that's really cool. Like, that was really cool. I got the chance to go up there. There was an EOD tech that had won. There was another, I believe she was FSS, but like, we had such a great time, such an awesome opportunity. So like, I left there with the cup full. And I got a message from the ACC command chief at the time, and he was like, hey, there's an issue with your package. So now I'm like, did they push the package I told them not to push? And like, I look like I've lost all credibility, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this whole huge thing. So I'm like, literally on my lunch break, I'm like in tears. Like, I call my husband, like, oh my gosh, they have the wrong package, and now I'm gonna be like, they're gonna take the hardware away, like freaking out. And sure enough, the chief calls me and he's like, Sergeant Zimmer. And I'm like, hey chief. And he goes, do you have a couple minutes to talk? He's like, we had a question on your package. And I was like, oh, here it comes. And then General Carlisle, who at the time was the ACC commander, Comac, gets on the phone. He's like, Senior Zimmer? And I was like, yes. I didn't know who it was. And he goes, do you know who this is? And I was like, no, sir. And he's like, this is General Carlisle. Well, I mean, I was like, I'm in my car, 95 degrees in Valdosta, Georgia, just hot, sweaty. I'm like miserable. And I was like, oh, hey, sir. Like, what do you do? Like, I'm like, what do you do on a phone? And then he starts with this whole, hey, I just want to let you know, we're really proud of all the hard work that you've done, and we know that you worked. So he starts giving me like the letdown speech. So I'm like, just rip the Band-Aid off, right. Just get it over with. And all of a sudden, like, everyone starts screaming and yelling, and they're like, you're one of our 12 outstanding airmen of the year. And it was a solid probably 15 seconds of just silence, and they're like, Airman Zimmer, are you there? And I'm like, yep. They're like, you okay? And I'm like, nope. So I'm in my car on lunch, just crying hysterically. And it was funny because like one of the other airmen had been walking by and they're like going through the window like, are you okay? And I'm like, right, just ugly crying. So then before I hang up the phone, he goes, but you can't tell anybody until it's officially released. So I'm like, but can I tell my husband? And he's like, you can't tell anybody. So then Chief messaged me, she's like, you can tell your husband, like it's fine, like he's not gonna tell anybody. Because I'm like, I can't live with that secret, that's terrible. So I had to walk around for about 6 weeks.
They just love to do that to you, don't they?
Yeah,
they just love to trick you, to make you think one thing, and then you're like, oh, it's good news.
So and that chief I was telling you about, Chief Seabass, so they had taken me up to Washington, D.C. Actually it was to advocate for mill-to-mill BAH, because that's when they were talking about taking it away. So I went up there as just a personal story that we could talk on the Hill and stuff. And we're sitting in the airplane. At the time it was Colonel Kunkel, who's now, I believe he's Major General Kunkel, and Chief Seabass, and we're all in this little tiny mill airplane, which I hate to fly. Ironically, I'm in the Air Force, and at the time, Colonel Kunkel turns around to me, looks at me, and I'm like sweating bullets because I'm on a plane. I hate flying. And he goes, do you have anything you need to tell me? And I was like, like what? Like I'm looking, he's like, is there something that you need to tell me? And I was like, no, sir. And then like Chief Seabass turns around and looks at me, he's like, are you sure there's not anything you need to tell us? And I'm like, and I was like, Comic said I can't say anything. And they were like, then they started like clapping. They're like, okay, like we know. So yeah, it was just a really awesome opportunity, but I firmly believe that, so it's hard because that's an individual award, but it was, in reality, the only reason I got that was because of the team I worked for. And the leaders above me and the people that poured into me. I was at a rescue OSS at the time, and I was a young, senior airman. I was like, send me on all the deployments. And they're like, you're going to stay here and train. And I was like, that's not tactically relevant. And I fought tooth and nail. And they're like, if you're going to pour into anything, pour into training, train other people. So I had the opportunity just to train, and it was the best. But at the same time, I was like, I felt like I didn't deserve to be there because I hadn't deployed. I didn't get to go on all the cool Gucci TDYs. I was like stuck in the vault preparing people, not realizing how important that really was. And that really set the foundation of me wanting to teach and really push towards teaching all the time. And then, just the team around me, and I actually just engaged with the first sergeant, Shirt Turner, and the commander. So we had two commanders at the time because they were doing changeover. One of them was Lieutenant Colonel Carrie Worth. She's now retired. And then the other one was now Colonel Mike Gallagher. And the two of them just intentionally poured into me, and they're like, they saw me and the trajectory I was going on, and they made sure I knew that. And they would just constantly, every single day, just, better, faster, stronger, better, faster, stronger, better, faster, stronger. My plate was this big, but they saw it as this big. So it was just the team around me that I was just a reflection of that team. That's really, when you look at the 12 OI program, yes, it's an individual person who's standing up there, but there's probably 300 people standing behind them that didn't have the opportunity to be there. And that's what I firmly believe in that award, is that, when I came back, I intentionally was like, I have to tell these people how important they were. All the way from, my major, when I was at the Intel Squadron, Major Alyssa Arbuckle, she's still a good friend. She's actually here, she's here in Dallas, and, she was another one who pushed me so much. So when I think about the 12 OY experience, I think about all of the people that just, when I say, I was thinking the end of the NFL games, where they pour the Gatorade bucket, that's what these people were doing every single day.
That's awesome.
But I was just a reflection up on that stage of being there and just having that award. But with that being said, the overall experience is just absolutely phenomenal. We take care of our 12 OY airmen, but there's a precedence that's set. I made it as a senior airman. So that meant staff first time, tech first time, made master second time. So there is a pace that is associated with, people say that, and I think that sometimes we don't necessarily have that conversation as much as we should. So like right now, I call it like I'm in my like resting era, and I'm trying just to enjoy like my time and just kind of like rest, because it has been 1,000 miles an hour since that moment, and like I'm to a point now where I'm like, I just need to rest some and just kind of catch my breath and like see what's next for me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So if you could tell, I mean, just to close it up, because, we're at this AFSA convention, if you could tell anyone the importance of, your experience being a command chief, being part of, being a PME instructor, you can tell them anything. We're talking a lot about development today. Throughout the summit, we've been talking about a lot about development. So you get to tell the Air Force anything, like impart some knowledge, drop some nuggets.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like right now, Master Sergeant Zimmer's sitting here, but like A1C Lambert's sitting here, and I like think back, and it's like, I used to watch all these Master Sergeants, like, and they'd sit there and they'd talk, and you'd be like, why am I gonna, like, what has this person done? Like, why do or even like chiefs, like, and you're sitting there, you're like, they have had so much experience. What is like the thing I'm gonna take away from them? And, if I could go back and tell A1C Lambert anything, it would just be to trust yourself. Because, and that goes everywhere, right? That goes tactical, that goes operational, that goes into every single part of your life. Trust yourself in your decision making. I was in Intel, I had loved Intel, and I didn't trust the Air Force when they're like, hey, you gotta go do DSD. I was so mad when I had to do DSD. As much as I loved instructing, at the time I was like, you're taking me out of something I'm so good at. But I had to just trust the Air Force, like they knew what to do for me. Trusting the Air Force when it came down to matching me up with different people. Like, you're not always going to get along with everybody in the Air Force. Like, that's just statistics. Like, when you look at it, like, I think of it like, I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and I'm okay with that. But you have to trust that you're going to provide that person something. So if I could go back and tell like my younger self, or tell like young airmen, is just trust in who you are. And especially as we're going into uncharted territory, as we look at our near peers, like, we're not going to have the liberties that we had in Afghanistan to have, or even in CENTCOM, like have those well-established TTPs and have those well-established operating areas. Like, we're going to have to think creatively, and we're going to have to trust each other.
Right.
And that's so scary. Like, that's so scary. Like we always say we trust each other. We always say we have each other's back, but like, I have to trust that you're taking care of yourself. I have to trust that you're holding up what you're supposed to be doing, but you also have to have trust in your leaders. Like, I have to trust that the decisions that are being made are for the right reasons and that they mean something. So the unique thing about trust is that I just can't hand you trust, right? I have to earn trust. So when you wake up every single day, that should be your top priority, is earning the trust of the people around you. Because if you have trust and your people trust in you, you can go do those things. You can go fight that conflict. You can go, like write up that awards package and or work on someone's EPB, and they know that you're going to fight for them. So it just, every single facet of the Air Force is really based on that trust aspect, and having trust with your people, having trust with your leaders, having trust even with like your family. Like, it all plays into it. So yeah, definitely my number one priority is just establishing and maintaining that trust throughout the Air Force.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
for thank you.
The conversation. It was great. I learned a lot too, and
thank you.
And hopefully we'll be posting this soon for you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah, thank you. It's been awesome, and thanks for what y'all do. I know it's sometimes going out on a limb and taking that risk, especially in like an era of social media. Everyone's like, ooh, right, but I think it's important that the more voices we hear of the Air Force, the more we're going to be able to find relatability among the force, and I think that's important.